Hi, this is Bill Hartzer, and this is the digital marketing podcast with Bill Hartzer for Thursday, April 1st, 2021. Promise that we won't have any April Fools jokes today, but I do have some great tips and maybe some tricks in there. So, welcome, Travis Bliffen from Stellar SEO. We're going to talk about links and link building and the importance of getting links to your website. So, welcome, Travis. Tell me a little about your background and how you got into link building or even into the SEO industry.
Sure, yeah, Bill. So thanks for having me on. I kind of got into the SEO industry almost as a coincidence.
Mhm.
I didn't really have a previous desire or even knowledge that the industry existed. Actually, on my way to work one day, I picked up a magazine, read through a list of best industries to get into in 2013.
Yep.
SEO was one of the 13 items on the list, something like that, and so it really piqued my interest. I started learning about it a little bit more, and I realized that that's something that I would want to do. And so I actually started by taking web design courses, like a web design certification
Mhm.
course through a college, the local college,
Sure.
and then from there, obviously, just practicing testing and doing some initial projects, which started as blog writing. I did those on Elance, which is now Upwork, and so that's
Yep.
how I kind of got into the industry in 2012, just completely by chance, and so that was probably the best $8 magazine I ever bought.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So we've always kind of thought about linking, and linking has changed, so over the years. I mean, Google was really, before Google came along, we really it was all primarily on-page factors, and Google's kind of claim to fame in the SEO, world was mostly about, they started evaluating links and using anchor text as links, and it was pretty, rudimentary. I mean, it got down to it. The more links you had with that particular anchor text, the more, the better you could rank. And so now we're completely different. Now it's not only just where that link is on the page, but whether, the intent, and of the link, and Google's actually able to use, kind of, you know an AI, AI, if you will, to actually look at and understand the article of and the link, that's in that article in particular. Um, so how first question for you, since you've been kind of doing linking for gosh, looks like about 10 years now, and how has linking changed, or are you kind of focused on where getting links on certain places of the page or certain types of sites, or are you looking for high value links on high domain authority sites, or how has it changed, and what are you kind of looking for right now when you consider it to be a good link versus a bad link?
Sure, yeah. So, excuse me. To start with change, I mean, in 2012, 2013, even 2014,
Mm-hmm.
you could set up a free Web 2.0 blog, link it directly to your website, and then use something like GSA Search Engine Ranker to build 3 or 4 tiers of links behind that, and
Sure.
actually have success ranking a page. I actually did like a test on that, and at the time I published it on Website Magazine. But basically, what we did is we set up a website for SEO in St. Louis
Mm-hmm.
because I lived near there at the time, and we did
Yep.
exactly that. We set up Web 2.0 links around it, set up GSA Search Engine Ranker to run behind it, and pretty much laid it all out in the article. Here's the exact setup we used, and then we ranked, number 3 or 4 for that keyword for a while. Of course, eventually it got taken down, but it was kind of proof of concept that you could do that. And that's when people first started to say, like, you actually can't do that anymore. It won't work. And so we thought, well,
Yep.
let's try it out and see. Um, and so, I mean, there was stuff like that. The next evolution was private blog networks. So now we're going to,
Sure.
use private blog networks, and those worked out well for years. I imagine if you set it up right, you could still use it. It just is a matter at this point. I feel like that it's really a lot more cost effective and less worrisome and less hassle just to go out and get links on real websites, because then you don't have to take care of them forever to maintain
Yep.
maintain what you have. And
Sure.
so what we look for, what we kind of, our thing is kind of what we call the sweet spot. So basically sites that fall somewhere between domain authority 30 to 70. And I actually don't even like domain authority as a metric. It's outdated. Domain rating from Ahrefs is a lot better. But we have to sell our blogger outreach service by domain authority because other agencies love it. Right.
Yep.
So that's how they compute. So we do have it on there, but I like domain rating. So anyway, the reason why we focus on sites in that tier is because once you get to, and there's exceptions, right? Like if you do an actual outreach campaign and you get featured on colleges, real college, things like that, then you want those. But what a
Yep.
lot of people do is they say, okay, I'm going to build links to my new website and I want to be on, Inc., Forbes. They just go down the list, right? Huffington Post used to be a huge one before they made all the Nofollow and stuff. The reason I don't advise starting there is because, one, those sites are generally less relevant to your own website.
Mhm.
Relevancy is very important. The second thing is, for a lot of those top tier publications, it's as easy as searching to figure out where you can go and buy a link on those. Right. And so if an easy search can figure out, okay, I can get onto Forbes here, here, and here for this much money, it's not really a secret that everybody, not everybody, but a lot of the links coming from those sites are probably just bought. Um,
Yep.
and so we don't necessarily push people in that direction just because I think that there's something to be said about creating a link profile that's very relevant and also difficult to recreate.
Mhm.
And so if you can build those kind of links, then you kind of build a moat around your website, right? Because if you go
Yep.
out and you just buy links on the top 20 publications, anybody that has the same amount of money can do that. But if you formulate an outreach plan, you reach out to a lot of really relevant sites, you get creative in how you're finding them, you put in the extra work. Those sites may not be as glamorous on the surface when you plug them in and look at the metrics, but 3, 5 years from now in the future, those same sites are still going to help you rank. And a lot of those won't be replicated by your competition. And so we really like to do a lot kind of in that area because it's worked out really well. We've ranked keywords that get over 1 million searches per month, very difficult keywords in that tier. And then we've
Sure.
also used the same thing, small local businesses. So it's not a matter of effectiveness because it does work just as well, if not better. Um, Second part of your question is links on the page. So
Yep.
generally we prefer contextual links, right? So not really sidebar, footer links, things like that. I'm not saying that they don't work because to some extent they still do. It's just one of those things where it's probably pretty easy to pick it up if you're doing a 30,000 foot overview from Google
Mhm.
that all these links are coming from sidebars because the only text around them is other links to completely unrelated stuff,
Sure.
right? They probably figure that out. And so in contributing content to websites and getting added to existing relevant content, then everything around it just reinforces what your site's about. And that's especially important, now that you don't want to use your exact keyword as the anchor text every single time because, 2012 that got killed. So I think that the contextual links very important. The exception of that being things like resource pages. If it's a really good resource page, like on a .gov website, an actual college resource page,
Mhm.
stuff like that, there's going to be a lot of random links on there. But again, I'm pretty sure Google can figure out it's a resource page. There's enough footprints there for us to find them on Google. So I'm
Yep.
sure there's enough footprints that they know what it is. And so that's, there's been a lot of changes in it, but that's kind of where we like to focus our efforts at. And it's just through a lot of repetition, we found out that that seems to work most effectively.
So you mentioned resource pages and so forth, and imagine the anchor text in a lot of those situations are going to be obviously 99% of the time they're going to be the name of the company and the name of the brand. Where it does get a little difficult, what I've seen in particular is that where you have an exact match domain name, let's say red widgets, and you sell red widgets, and that's the product, and you have redwidgets.com. And so it can kind of be interesting because that's essentially your brand, but it's also your keyword. And so uh, so ranking can be interesting uh, in that particular, in those particular situations, especially if it's, like keyword.com, and so, and that's the name of the brand. um, so how would you deal with, in those situations where the brand is actually, I guess the generic keyword, and that, can be, let's say hotels.com. So, you know, hotels.com, ranking for hotels.
Mm-hmm.
And, do you think Google's able to determine whether or not that's a brand name versus a keyword? Uh, how can, on the link building side, how would you kind of deal with something like that?
Yeah, so I think that partially at least they probably have a lot better understanding through structured data and through entities and things like
Mhm.
that,
Sure.
of what things are. And there's got to be some a level of brand recognition, especially when you get to a site like that. But the
Yep.
the second part of that is from a link building perspective, how do I approach that? So Google ranks pages versus entire websites, and you can see sometimes that there'll be 10 pages that can rank really well.
Mhm.
Page 11 won't rank very well at all, and sometimes it comes down to links, lack of links, or the anchor text of that particular page.
Yep.
So if we're going to launch a resource link building campaign and we were concerned that the name of the company would cause us to use the keywords way too often to link to them, then we would actually create another page that's the resource to link to that page specifically,
Okay.
with having no intention of ever ranking that page, because
Sure.
the site wide authority is still going to be built by obtaining those links. So if you send it to a great resource page that you don't need to rank, if it doesn't rank, then that's okay. And if it does rank, it's an added bonus. But you still built that site wide authority. And, you know, people hate the mention of link juice. But if you think about it like that, the flow, you can now
Yep.
direct, you can direct that authority that's been built up to the appropriate internal pages on the website. And so it's almost like a modified tiered link building, but you're just using your own website. And that's something that we've actually seen in cases where websites had over optimized anchor text profiles as well. You can use the same approach.
Yep.
You basically would build a lot of not harmful but easy to get links to um, kind of balance out the anchor text profile, and then you would create a resource page and then actually use that to send more power to those, because the harder a link is to get, also the editorial requirements usually get more strict, and so you can't really tell them
Sure.
I need you to use this exact anchor text. And so if you do that balance, you can actually fix the problem and build the authority of the site. And so it's not uncommon, but that would just be another application of the same kind of process.
Yeah. So kind of looking at the same thing is that when I have looked at link profiles and taken over sites where I know that they've, maybe they've had an SEO firm, work on the site previously, looking at the anchor text and looking at the kind of the distribution of anchor text, across all the links. In some cases, you can tell that an SEO has done or tried to rank a site, with a certain, for certain keywords, because some of the anchor text will be exact match anchor text. And, there'll be maybe, too many links to one particular page, with certain anchor text. And sometimes that, or if it's, even if the links are the homepage, they'll use that exact match anchor text a little bit too much in the overall link profile. So what I like to use is, if you go to one of the link tools, let's say Majestic, for example, and you can look at all of the anchor text links, all the and so it'll show you kind of the distribution of anchor text, and you'll have different, ideally, I like to have the company name and the brand, have more links than, in anchor text than but say, certain certain keyword pages that are trying to rank. In some cases, one case I'm dealing with a site that they did have previous SEOs, and the second most used anchor text is their main keyword. Unfortunately, those are in press releases and archived press releases from that are on PR Web, and those have links and those have history and so forth, and so it's difficult to just go in and get that anchor text removed. So in this case, I'm focusing all of the links and all of the link building that's done to just brand just to the brand, and with anchor text with the brand name. And so at some point, and I've done this before, at some point there's a point where you have essentially enough or even more, a lot more branded links versus that exact match anchor text, and that will kind of override it. And if there's kind of a you know over optimization of that anchor text, then having more branded text will actually help in that case. So one question I have for you is whether or not you look at the overall profile of a site, and what type of links they have, and how much anchor text, exact match versus branded versus so forth, and if that kind of plays into how you do a customized link building program for one particular site.
Yeah, we do. And so we look at it on the site-wide level first, and then
Mm-hmm.
if there's warning signs at the site-wide level, then we go and look at it again on a page level. Um,
Sure.
and and so, and a lot of times there's going to be pages in particular that will have issues. And so, what you mentioned, general rule of thumb, those work very well when you're planning out what in general will I use for the anchor text profile.
Yep.
We like to go a step further with that and look at, if I look at the top 3 ranking sites, what does their anchor text profile specifically look like? Because in
Sure.
some industries, it will actually be a much higher usage of keywords or partial match keywords than
Yep.
you would ever recommend for other industries. And in some industries, that's really the only way to kind of crack the top few spots,
Yep.
unless you're going to run like an enterprise level link building campaign and just do it through massive amounts of authority.
Sure.
And so that's where we go as we look at, is there something different between this site and the top sites? And something with that too, just in case you're going to try to replicate this at home, you have to keep in mind the total number of referring domains to a page, because the fewer you have, the higher optimized your anchor text can be. But if those numbers go up, your percentages can't stay the same. And so something we look at in that case is, one that we were actually looking at earlier today is car accident attorney, for a website that's stuck on page 3, and no matter what, they can't move. And so what we figured out is there's 75 sites that link to that one. 50 of those have car accident somewhere in the phrase. All right. And that puts them around 70%, something like that.
Yep.
I don't know the exact percent, but if you look at the other 3, 4, 5 ranking sites, the next highest one is like 43% of
Sure.
the total have, that keyword in it. But the exception is there's actually one site ranking and they only have 7 or 9 links to their page. And so they actually have like 78%, 75, 78% of the links are an exact match keyword. And the only reason why that's working for them right now is because there's just really not that many links. But if they scaled that up to, have 75 and they kept the same ratios, they would run into a problem. And so there's a lot that you can take away by taking the time to look on a granular level at what's really different between these, and then take into consideration the overall amount of links as well.
Yeah, so it's a really great point because of the fact that it is, SEO really is not one templated, thing. It's, as you mentioned, certain industries you can get away with certain different percentages of anchor text versus brand versus and so forth. And so in other industry, other keywords or other search queries, that, let's say, in the SEO industry, it's completely different than it would be in, like I said, in the legal industry, versus maybe even some kind of obscure uh, B2B topic. Like if it's, some kind, something that, some kind of manufacturing, or, where there's basically 10 or 12 companies that do that type of manufacturing, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they're competing. So those, that approach there would be completely different with linking, and the percentages and of anchor text and so forth would be completely different than, like you say, like you mentioned, car accident attorney, or something like that. And that's kind of where it's interesting, because I think that over the years, that has, it used to be that you could apply, essentially the same link building type of percentages and formulas, but now it is query dependent. It is, we are dealing with relevance, and we are dealing with, relevance of of the link. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just, when it comes to link building, it's not just, getting a link on, on a sidebar, or getting a link from some site, that has a high domain authority. It's there's so much more involved, right now, and that, I think it may even get tougher as we go along. And link building in particular probably will become, in the industry, just by itself, because there's so many intricacies, and so much involved.
Yeah, I think so. And so we're just really big sticklers on relevancy because it just
Yep.
hasn't let us down so far. If
Sure.
all things, you don't want to use penalized sites, things like that. But if you pass all the basic checks and then you're thinking, is this actually relevant and reasonable to be here? That usually goes a long way. And that
Yep.
also plays into your anchor text, because I've seen a lot of cases where people had an irrelevant site and a mostly irrelevant article. And so they tended to use optimized anchor text to compensate for the lack of relevancy anywhere else in that process. Right.
Sure.
But if the site's pretty relevant, the article is extremely relevant. One of our favorite anchor text approaches is co-citation. So link to words before or after the keyword. And so you end up with a very extremely diverse anchor text profile. But there's still plenty of relevancy there because the entire sentence with your link in it is very much about what you do. But now you have, 100 different ways that your page is linked to. But if you read the sentences, the paragraph, the article, there's a high level of relevancy still there. And so if I was going to apply any rule of thumb, I'd say that's probably the one that we've not really ran into any issues with. Um, to follow that up, if you see that a page hits, position 12, position 10, and it gets stuck, you keep adding more links. That's when you might go in
Yep.
and then fine tune it. Okay, let's add 2 partial match anchors, one per month, and see, and things like that, the fine tuning. But that's also a big difference between when you start on a new website and an existing website with history. Is
Yep.
existing websites, they may have 20 years of different practices applied to them already, and so you can't just go and approach those the same way because it's very dependent on what's already been done. A new
Sure.
site, you kind of have that luxury of starting from zero. So if you do apply practices like co-citation, relevancy, you can avoid most over optimization issues. And the majority of keywords will end up ranking without ever even needing to use a keyword. So you kind of end up with a really strong natural link profile, but you still get the good results. But it's just a matter of figuring out what's the scenario and applying the right steps. Um, and so we're very big on processes. So, the anchor text for any particular site is going to be different. The needs are going to be different. But
Yep.
if you use a process of uncovering that, then you can apply that process to any website, any industry, new or old website, and you'll get the right information. And so we're big on processes over, rules, particular things. Find a process,
Sure.
repeat the process, make sure it works.
So one final question: no follow versus, I guess, we call it do follow, links. Any, would you still get a no follow link if it's completely relevant? And do you think that no those no follow links could potentially help?
So you by saying the word do follow link, you've probably started at least 10 threads on Facebook right now, people
Yep.
debating if that's a real thing or not. So
Sure.
um, the short answer is yes. No follow links can be really useful because link building is a tool. So you have to think
Yep.
about what's the desired outcome. Sometimes the outcome is higher SEO rankings organically. So no follow links generally are not going to help with that as much. But other things links can do, build brand recognition, send referral traffic, both of
Hmm.
those things, it doesn't matter if it's do follow or no follow. If I publish an
Yep.
article on a website, people read the article, love it, and come to my website, it was worth publishing, even though
Sure.
there may or may not be SEO value. And so no follow links can be used really well as long as you use them in the right application. And that's where I think people go wrong is they don't stop to think about what's the right application for no follow links. Is there a potential to benefit from it outside of rankings? Go through that thought
Yep.
process, and then you'll know when it makes sense and when it doesn't if you kind of approach it that way.
Great. So we're just about out of time. So how can we get in touch with you, Travis, and how can we uh, essentially hire you to take care of our links, and if we're an agency, work with you for link building.
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch, just go to our website, stellarseo.com.
Okay.
Basically, we only offer a few services: custom link building, blogger outreach,
Sure.
white label link building, and law firm SEO. So you probably won't get lost in the service menu. It's not one of
Yep.
those where we do every service under the sun.
Sure.
But before you do that, go to our blog, check it out, look at some of the guides we published. It'll give you a pretty deep look, like our link building guide. It's 12, 13,000 words.
Okay.
If by the time you read through that, if you like what you're seeing in there, that's pretty much what you get when you hire us, is that kind of thinking, that approach.
Yep.
So definitely start with the blog things and get a good sense of what we do, and then reach out if you think it makes sense. But even if not, there's good information there that's definitely worth checking out.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. This has been the Digital Marketing with Podcast with Bill Hartzer for Thursday, April 1st, 2021. Thanks again, Travis Bliffen from Stellar SEO.
Thank you.
Thanks.